A lot of people don't even realize they're in an abusive relationship or in a toxic relationship when they're actually in it. And then the excuses that we make and the what if, the if only I
Right.
had anticipated their needs better, if only I had made the coffee better, if only I'd been neater, if only. And we kind of look
Right.
back at it after the fact. And you can see how that was just kind of part of the trap. It was part of that mind melt that seems to happen with toxic people. They seem to just kind of suck us in. And once we get sucked
Right.
into that world, it's like we live in our world. One of the analogies they use is kind of like, it's like Alice in Wonderland. It's like it starts off with this
Yeah.
cute little rabbit. And it's like he's holding a watch. He seems interesting. He's got somewhere to go. And before you know it, and you're in this upside down world where sometimes you're big, sometimes you're small. And there's somebody running around on an axe wants to rip your head off. And just every so often, it's just like the world doesn't actually make sense. When you're on the
At
other side
all.
of it, when you come out of the hole and you look back,
Right.
the hell was I thinking? And
Right.
even when you're in the hole, you're like, oh, if only I could make this world make sense. This is not reality. It's not my reality.
And nothing you do is ever going to make it make sense either. And I think that a lot of times with our minds doing that, the what if thing is we are trying to correct or fix what's going on so that we can be at peace or so that we can move forward. We don't realize that there's actually not even an opportunity or possibility for that. So even though you keep trying, there really is nothing. Like you can literally exhaust every single option and there is nothing that is going to change that. Not even that you need to change, but it's the other person who needs to work on themselves.
Well, I think that even that analogy we were talking about, like the Alice in Wonderland, where you just kind of wake up in this world and
Mm-hmm.
things are upside down and backwards and nothing is making
Yeah,
sense. Our brains are still trying to make sense of things that don't make sense. And you can
true.
understand how someone else's insane world that we just kind of got sucked into can warp
Mm-hmm.
your own reality. That's blue and that's orange. And you're like, no, it's not.
Yes.
And then after a
Yep.
while, it's just like, okay, it's blue, it's orange, like whatever. And then
It's
you say
like
it's blue and orange, and
psychological
then they say, no,
warfare.
it's purple and orange, you dumbass.
Yeah,
And it's just like, well,
right.
it's like, oh, wait a second. This is just a freaking power play, isn't it? But we don't actually see it. We're trying to actually make sense of it.
Yeah. But it's like psychological warfare. I mean, it really is because it's a mind fuck, because it's a constant like twist of like what your reality is because they don't actually live in reality and they lie to themselves, even though they don't see it as a lie, right?
Mhm.
Even just with colors. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, fine, that's what colors you think it is. And even though you're kind of accepting it just to keep the peace, then you kind of start like more and more of these kind of things happen in a pattern. And then you don't even realize the pattern. And you're like, well, maybe I am seeing things incorrectly. Maybe it is me.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you are the problem.
Yeah. But here's the whole thing. The way they use words and the way they twist reality, and it's the whole thing about keeping us off balance, right? And
Right.
it's like they have all these tactics that they use, the gaslighting, which is exactly what we're talking about, like just changing history, changing reality. And then there's the projection. It's just like you look mad. It's like I'm not actually mad, but
Yes.
you're mad, and you want me to be mad. So it just kind of shows the one. It's just emotional immaturity. It's like I'm feeling
Mm-hmm.
mad. I don't know how to process it. I'm going to make you mad, watch you process it, and that's going to make me feel better. So I'm going to take all these toxic emotions and just give them to somebody else, especially someone empathetic. Just like, yes, we can take emotions.
Right.
We love emotions because that makes us feel useful because we can be around people. And so they're like,
Right.
perfect. I have all these emotions I don't want to do it. And the lie that we tell ourselves is one day when they're healed, when they're fixed, they'll come and help me unpack all this crap that they just dumped on me. And that they never.
Yeah. Yeah. Or that everything's going to be okay. Even if that did happen, that they became healed, they got healing and they got better. Now you have got such significant trauma
Mhm.
that they're not even emotionally mature enough to even handle that. And on top of it, by them being able to help you with that would mean that they would have to accept that they're the ones who traumatized you.
But they don't
And
actually
that's,
see it as traumatizing you. They're just being themselves. They're watching you fall
yeah.
apart, and they're like,
And it's
"Oh,
your
yeah,
fault that you feel that way.
yeah, there is
There's
something
nothing
wrong
wrong
with
with
me.
me.
There is something wrong with me. I'm in a relationship with you for way longer than I needed to be. It's just like
Right.
it's not
Right.
like the signs weren't there. I just chose not to see them. And then when
Yeah.
they were there, I still made excuses.
Well,
And
because some of it is really hard to see, man. Like when you start to really realize that you have been manipulated and like all of these things that are happening to you by somebody that you love and thought wanted to get help, because a lot of times they will say, oh, I'm going to go get help, but that only lasts for, a day or two or a week. There's no consistency in it. Like they really would do this to me. It's not just somebody coming off the street and robbing you. This is somebody who's like conditioned you to believe like they're not a bad person. You are a bad person at this point,
mhm,
and for me, I started to realize like, for the
mhm.
most part, the reason for the enjoyable moment or activity was to further the manipulation later on. It's almost like depositing money in the bank
Yeah,
for
yeah.
later, because if we're going to be in a good mood and everything's going great, then I'm going to be completely blindsided by what's happening next, or maybe even not paying attention to the cheating or the manipulation that's happening. And so one of the things that I did was I was like, I had a mental funeral for the person that I loved. That's a person I loved, but he wasn't there. But I need to grieve this, because
Mhm.
you get to a point in your healing where you're like, how do I process this, digest this, learn, like untangle and unpack all of this? They're still alive. You know what? I'm gonna have a mental funeral with them. And then mentally I will go visit their grave.
That's a really neat way to just kind of compartmentalize everything. Even in that conversation that you just said, all of a sudden it's just like, oh yeah, they weren't who I thought they were, so I'm gonna go mourn them. But then you aren't who you thought you were either. So then it also becomes, oh, I actually have to mourn the loss of that dysfunctional part of me. Because it's our thinking brain that got us into trouble, right? Because we were trying to make sense of things that weren't making sense. And that was slowly driving us insane. The ground kept shifting, right? It's just like just a little, and then it would just be earthquakes every so often. And then the narcissistic rage would come out and it's like, I must have really did something wrong. It's like you
Right.
raging about breakfast like doesn't justify that action.
That's true. And I think it's very valid to say that while our minds are in these situations where, like we really don't realize how much we're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So we don't really realize what's actually going on. Then you can come to like maybe the next conclusion of like, okay, what do I need to do? Do I break up with this person? But at the same token, it's so hard to know when you're in manipulation, because had the person come up to you and said, I'm going to do all of these things to you, will you accept them?
Yeah.
However, if they play all these games and they do the nice things, then the little bit of the bad thing, nice thing, a lot of the bit of the bad thing, you know what I mean? Like all the push and pull, when you admit that you've got a problem, then now I'm like, okay, I can be here for you. I'll walk with you through that. But then it becomes again a part of the manipulation, because then in a week or two, then it is right back to like ground zero.